In this video, I'm going to be discussing the PixNub presets and actions for HDR, and in particular with the actions, I'll be discussing the actions that correspond to specific presets. Now there are two types of actions that comes in this set. The ones that are called ACR, and ACR by the way is Adobe Camera Raw, but those actions are simple one-step actions that are just applying a Camera Raw filter. And in these actions are the exact same settings as the presets that this download also comes with that can be applied in Lightroom or Camera Raw. That'll make a little more sense when we get into it. And there's also other actions that the set comes with that are for creating Photoshop layers for a little bit different effect, a similar but different effect. But it's a little more complex, and I'll be discussing these in a different video. So this video is only going to be discussing the ACR actions as well as the presets. So before we get into the actions, I'm just going to discuss the presets. Now the set comes with 20 different presets, and those are universal for Photoshop and Lightroom. You can use those for either. And if your image is already cut out, you're not going to be able to apply that preset directly to the raw image because you have to cut it out first, and so you're no longer in the raw image. Now, if your image is not cut out and you have the raw, you're better off opening the raw directly in Camera Raw. But I'm working with a cutout here, so I'm going to have this open in Photoshop, and then to access the Camera Raw filter, it's under Filter and under Camera Raw Filter. And then to apply a preset, you'll come down to the drop down and then load settings. Then you'll go to the folder that's called presets for Lightroom and Photoshop Camera Raw. And under that you'll have a basic HDR effect and a dramatic skies effect. And for a portrait image of a person, you'll want to use the basic HDR effect. I'm just going to grab number 5 here, and these are in strength 1 through 10. So 1 is more subtle, 10 is the strongest, and it just goes up from 1 to 10. And so 5 is like right in the middle. So it loads in, it's quick. You can see your settings, and you can also adjust those from right within Camera Raw. So any of the settings that you want to adjust, you can tweak right in Camera Raw and then apply it. If you want to load one of the other filters in, you'll just go to Load Settings. You'll grab another one and load it. And then I'll point out too that these presets are only dealing with the settings from your exposure down through saturation on the basic tab. It doesn't adjust temperature or tint, and anything else that you have in the other tabs adjusted, it does not adjust those either. And so that way, if you want to set some other settings in here, like a vignette or a black and white here, and adjust some other effects, you can keep those and toggle through the different presets, and it's not going to affect it. I'll just demonstrate. Let me turn the temperature. I'll go way up, so something that I would never actually use, but just so you can see that this will maintain whatever. It doesn't really matter. That's just load setting. This is just for demonstration. So you see when I loaded the other settings in, it loaded all of these, but it kept your temperature and the tint setting that you had. And then once you had these where you want, then of course you would just hit OK, and it's going to apply that in Photoshop. Now in Lightroom, the same presets are available. So I've got the image under the Develop tab. I've already got these loaded here. I'm going to delete those just so I can show you how to load those in. So under the Presets drop-down, there's a plus menu. And if you click Import Presets, and then you find the folders that you want. And in this download, you've got Basic HDR Effect, and then a Dramatic Skies Effect. So we're going to load this folder that's called Basic HDR Effect. So Shift to highlight all of them, click Import, and then you can rename this folder whatever you want. I'll just call this Basic HDR so it matches the name of the folder as downloaded. And once you've got those in place, you can just maximize that. And then all you have to do is hover your mouse over, and you can see that I'm not even clicking on it. And the effect is changing just by what the mouse is hovered over. And as soon as you click on one, it's going to actually apply the settings, and then you can change whatever you need. And then again, just like in Photoshop, this only affects the exposure down through the saturation. So let's just crank the white balance so you can really see what it's doing. And then if you choose any other setting, you notice that it changes these settings, but it doesn't affect anything other than these. Of course, I wouldn't use anything that looks like that, but just to demonstrate. Next thing too is this HDR reset. If you click on that, again, it just resets these 10. And anything else you have set, you see we still have a temperature and tint applied. It doesn't reset those. And that's handy because if you're doing like black and white conversions, making it sepia, adding, some vignette or whatever you're doing, you can reset or switch your HDR settings, and it's only going to affect the settings that it needs to do. Okay, back into Photoshop here. Now the actions, let me undo what I did on that. It's just saying we can start from scratch. But the actions, the ones that say ACR, those correspond to those same presets that we used for Lightroom or ACR. And so you see we've got HDR strength 0.1 through 0.10. These are the exact same presets that we were just looking at in Lightroom. Now the ones that say dramatic skies, we didn't go over those yet, but they worked exactly the same. These are just settings that you would apply to a landscape that's got a dramatic sky that you want to make the sky pop. But for, like I say, for portrait images, stick with your regular HDRs. If you just grab the one you want and hit play, it is going to apply the action. Now, if you want to change to a different strength, you have to undo that or you're going to double up on the effect. So I'll just Control Z to undo that. Grab a different one. Hit play. You see that's now applied. And then let me undo that again. And then these ones below that are checked in this checkbox that say user input next to them, what that is the camera raw filter is checked next to that step. And this checkbox is the show dialog checkbox. So if that's on, it's going to show the dialog and pause at that step. So for example, at the camera raw, it's going to pause for us to accept the settings or to make changes. So it pops up, it automatically puts those settings in. And that's handy because then you don't have to load the preset from here. And it's already preloading those. And you can just change whatever you want to change. Hit OK. And then it's applied directly in Photoshop. I'm going to do another thing too. I'm going to create a smart object on this because often when you're working, in particular with sports photo automation, it works with smart objects. And so just so I can show you what it does when you apply this to a smart object, it's going to apply that as a smart filter. You can turn that on or off. Now, very important though, if you run this twice, the same thing, like I mentioned before, you don't want to double apply this. You see that effect is very strong, and that's because it's applied twice as two different smart filters. And you can turn one off at a time. And there may be times where you want to use it twice, but generally that's going to give you something that's too extreme. So if you're running this on a smart filter and you want to reapply it, you can just grab that camera raw smart filter and throw it in the trash. And then you can run it again on a different strength and it will apply the new strength to your image. Last thing I guess I can show you since we're here is for a an image that's a raw format that of course doesn't have transparency because a raw image won't, but for like a landscape type image, it's best to open the raw image up directly into Camera Raw. So if you open a raw file, it will automatically open up Camera Raw for you. And it's already remembered the last settings because I've ran it on this before. So if I go back to the Camera Raw defaults, you see that this is the very washed out and default looking or bland looking sky. And if I load settings, now for these, for landscapes you can use the regular HDR, but we've also got these dramatic skies. And I'm going to use the strongest one, number 10 here. And you see that that really brings the clouds out. Now, in any of these, the sky presets will use some dehaze, which depending on the type of clouds that can give a darkening effect. So it's best to just come in here and tweak things as needed, especially on a landscape when you're doing this much of a dramatic change. You may want to fine tune it. But look how quick that was to turn what was just a dull sky that the image was worthless. This is actually a pretty good sky image we could use in a graphics design, in like a sports template, for instance, where we have, an athlete and then some stuff in the foreground. I mean, we turned a pretty dull looking sky into what you just saw. So same thing in Lightroom. Let's go back to Lightroom here. You can open up a raw image, of course, directly in Lightroom. And then to get those other presets, you'd have to import the one called Dramatic Skies. Just a repeat of what we did on the other set. And then again, every time you import them, it puts it under the user preset folder. So let's rename that. Dramatic Skies. And then again, just hovering over previews it, and as soon as you click on it, it's not going to apply these until you actually click on the preset, but then you can come in and make any changes you want to that particular image. Anyway, pretty cool. So thanks for watching, and if you're interested at all in these presets and actions, please be sure to visit our website. That is pixnub.com.